Ethnicity is very important in character portrayal in video games. Whether you're Hispanic, white, black, Asian, or some mixture in between, race and ethnicity not only plays a pivotal role in story, but how players and society view these races outside of games. Game culture is primarily dominated by white protagonists, and it is often rare to see a minority take a key and pivotal role. But when they do, their role is often oversimplified into a niche that an audience is familiar with. Dark characters as villains, Asians as exotic beauties, Japanese as samurais and ninjas, the list goes on and on. This is our video on the misrepresentation and stereotypes of minorities in video games.
People of color are underrepresented in the video game industry. A study found that when comparing the representation of video game characters to the US Census, white and Asian people were overrepresented, while people who are Black, Hispanic, and Native American were underrepresented. What makes this more unfortunate is that when people of color are represented in video games, they are often portrayed stereotypically. Black and Latino people are often in athletic, violent, or criminal roles. They are usually represented in secondary roles and inhibiting urban environments. African Americans are normally portrayed as verbally aggressive, athletic, and extremely muscular. They are often most portrayed in sports games. In fact, over 80% of Black characters appear as competitors within sports-oriented games. Sports games affirm Black athletic superiority instead of intellectualism and hard work for their skill. Latinos are often portrayed with tattoos, religious, and sexualized. The lack of Latino representation is surprising because they are a growing ethnic group in the real world. Native Americans are often portrayed stereotypically with tomahawks, bows, and arrows, feathered headdress, and a connection to the spiritual world. When there are characters that are Latino, Black, or Native American, they often have roles that do not express their characters outside of stereotypes.
Now we all know women in video games are sexualized, but women minorities get sexualized even more so. Orientalizing, exoticizing, and romanticizing races from the East is pretty common in games that are marketed towards the West. Chun-Li's thunder thighs, Taki's skin-tight suit, Tifa's tight clothes, and 2B's assets are all examples that not only contribute to the sex sells aspects of game marketing, but also to a Western audience that gets their rocks off to curvaceous, ethnically diverse characters.
The portrayal of enemies in action, war, and shooter games is significant because the player spends most of their time killing the enemies, and Muslim blood is used far too often in games such as these. This historically influential religion, composed of a multitude of nationalities, ethnicities, and languages, has been diminished to a few stereotypes that are told through Western storytelling and biases. A Muslim character in a game probably has a beard, dark skin, an AK-47, and a camel while aggressively yelling Allahu Akbar, and you probably have to kill him. Unfortunately, this image is a product of United States political atmosphere, and it only amplifies Islamophobia when reproduced in games. This can negatively affect the mental health of people who identify as Muslim because they experience discrimination, hate crimes, and displacement in society. Of the few studies on Muslim health that exist, most identified that repetitive harassment was the biggest factor contributing to long-term mental health issues in Muslim populations.
Video games have mostly portrayed their protagonists as stoic white heroes. On the other hand, minorities rarely get their chance in the spotlight and have often been set aside as minor characters with stereotyped accents and traits. This design choice could ultimately impact players' perception of society as games repeatedly pound their heads on these notions. A study on racial stereotyping in video games showed that white males were less likely than minority males to be portrayed as aggressive. Furthermore, the white males that are depicted aggressive are portrayed in a military setting, while the minorities who are portrayed as aggressive are only depicted in fighting scenes. The difference of portrayal between whites and non-whites leave an impression to gamers that white people are fighting with a purpose, example, for justice. On the other hand, the lack of context on why minorities are depicted aggressively enforces the belief that they are aggressive by nature.
And this concludes our video on the representation of minorities in video games.